All right, this first video we're going to be reacting to in the Tonight Zone is coming us from Das Food, which is a wonderful creator we have watched many a time before. Very, very wonderful, down to earth, cool, great person, great content. So if you have not already, make sure you hit that link that just showed up in the Twitch chat and click the link down in the description down below if you're in the future on YouTube to like and subscribe to this creator so you support their official release of their content. This is kind of like targeted at me, unfortunately, because this video is did DBD's Alien Chapter fail? Obviously, you guys know I've grinded the tail attacks up to be the number 4 xenomorph in the world on PC in terms of total tail attacks. So obviously I'm a little biased here, so it's going to be kind of hard to answer this, but I will do my best. I'll do my best. But yeah, this is going to be interesting. So hey, Kaiser, how's it going? How are you, friend? Very well in the Today's Zone.
There's certain chapters that when people talk about what needs to come to Dead by Daylight, they get discussed as, oh, these are the slam dunks. These are the Rushmore picks. These are the ones, the first round draft.
Hey, Salem. It's good to see you, friend.
And by this point, I feel like most everybody's pretty sick of hearing about the same ones. But you know, I mean, it's Springtrap from Five Nights at Freddy's. It's Predator. It's Jason Voorhees in the Friday the 13th chapter. And for a long time, one of these was Alien and the Xenomorph, which is why it's so crazy to me that after 3 months of it being in the game, it's time to actually ask the question, did the Alien chapter in Dead by Daylight fail? Hello friends, I'm Das Food, and today I want to look at the Alien chapter and see why there's kind of this general feeling around it that maybe it didn't quite hit like we expected it to. Now, before anybody goes off and rushes,
that's great. I'm glad, Fred.
Everybody's going to have
it's really great.
Subjective
I'm proud of you.
About every single chapter. There are people who their favorite chapter was Tools of Torment. Right?
My favorite chapter is this one.
I hated that chapter. I've been very vocal about it. I did not like it, but some people.
You feel better soon? Thank you.
By the same token, I'm a clown main. Most people
Sleep token. I
like that chapter. I loved it. So the whole point being, we're going to try to be more objective with this and kind of go for more, I guess, community consensus than any personal, well, I didn't like it, so this is a failure, or oh, I loved it, so this is the greatest chapter of all time.
That's what I'm trying to avoid.
We're going to look at some of the numbers, and we're also going to go and just kind of break it down bit by bit and see what we can come up with. So I do need to start off with the numbers, because the numbers are what a lot of people are bringing up to try to make the case that Alien failed. It's what I've seen the most on places like Twitter. So the numbers matter, right? The numbers do matter. If you go to Steam charts, which by the way, as would be indicated by the name, does not take into account the Switch players
or console,
take into account the Xbox players. It doesn't take into account the PlayStation players, and obviously it doesn't take into account the mobile players because that's basically a different game. So there are a lot of people who could be playing Dead by Daylight that are not playing on the Steam pages, right? They're not using the Steam client to play Dead by Daylight. They're even PC players.
Got my Steve back
on Steam. So to say that this creates a fractured version of reality would be completely
sorry position. That's good.
Should
be super proud of that, bro. That's awesome.
A pretty good case to be made that Steam is where the most players play out of all of the platforms, but there are no hard numbers on that, so it's more of just a theory than an outright fact.
Game theory.
It does matter. I would say it absolutely matters. What the Steam charts look like do have some indication. They offer some light.
It's an impression, right? You can't state it as objective fact because it's leaving out so much data, but it is an impression. Why are you using cereal rations on Xenomorph? Why are you using cereal rations on... Never mind. We're not getting into this again.
Really is. And in the case
I get it. Some of your favorite content creators made tier lists when the character was still in PTB and thought cereal rations was good. Get over it. Not that great of an add-on.
Alien chapter, the numbers are not especially great. So it saw, as soon as Alien came out, right? It came out in August of 2023, and August saw a decrease of 5,067 players. But to be fair, Alien came out
it's part of that add-on tree where if you like you put something down to get order reading.
They lost
that one's all about the turrets.
904 players in September.
It's not that great.
After that, in October,
here's the deal: having an add-on that's like where are the turrets placed, when you already have a general idea of like where the turrets will be placed on average, just because the survivors can't go very far with them. So it's either going to be by the tunnel, it's going to be by the gen, it's going to be in a tile around the turret station. Like it's going to be one of 3 places. So running an entire add-on slot to get something that you should already know and be able to figure out or like, you know, deduce it's just silly to me. Yo, Cheesy Casserole, thanks so much for the follow, friend. I very, very much appreciate that. Hopefully you're doing well in the today zone. Yeah, it becomes more redundant the more you play this character. So I don't know why people think it's like the bee's knees. But like, I know where turrets are confirmed place. It's like they're where the survivors are, you dip. If you have 16 meters of footstep reading and the ability to hear in the tunnels, the turrets are going to be where the survivors are. So if you're crawling under in the tunnels, and you hear, okay, well, you know, somebody's up on this gen, like, there's probably a turret out there too, you know? It's like, it's information you would get. This is how I feel about this entire add-on tree of like aura reading having to do with turrets or the turret stations or whatever. It's like, it's information you could get for like 3 or 4 extra seconds of running through the tunnels. Oh my God. Which
of course was also when we started getting the October.
Bro, you're not getting it. No, I know. You just think that this effect is way more good than it is. It's just not. It's a training wheels add-on. You don't need it.
For Dead by Daylight, they only gained 916 players. If you do the math yourself, yeah, congrats, but I'll go on and tell you, that's a net change of negative 10,055 players, which is not ideal for one of the iconic licenses coming to the game. Now, I understand that some licenses are a lot more niche than others. Some are not expected to draw.
I think, okay, so I'm going to say something, and it's going to be offensive to a lot of you guys that play this game. A lot of you just fucking suck at your macro game. I would say one of the biggest things that I see when I'm doing the match reviews is that your guys' macro game, like just the general DBD population in terms of you guys, the general DBD population has just terrible macro games. Survivor, killer, doesn't matter which the role. Your macro game is terrible. You don't know what's going on around the map at any given point. You don't know what gen people are likely on. You don't know what gens are the best ones to do first, which ones to save for last. Like, which is fine, but then you can't just sit here and be like, oh, no, Zero Rations is an amazing add-on. I'm like, if you just have a generally all right macro sense, you don't need this add-on. But like, I'm gonna crutch it because I don't want to be better at the game. That's fine, but don't tell me it's a great add-on when I'm telling you it's a training wheels add-on.
All the same numbers. So you think of something like I don't know,
that's a good point to me. So that is true. I wonder how, like, if we look at like the Steam charts, you know, that might be a fun experiment someday. Look at the Steam charts and see like dips in player counts based on like college semesters and stuff like that. Be cool.
Hellraiser's awesome, but it is a more niche property, so they probably didn't expect it to pull the same kind of numbers. Or maybe you look at something like Sadako Rising, which was obviously the Ringu chapter. And yeah, I mean, over the 3 months that game was big, and the reason, by the way, let me go on and say, I choose 3 months because every 3 months they put out a new DLC. So after 3 months, you can start making the case, well, okay, but there's something new in the game. Did that influence it? So that's, in case you're curious, that's why I'm going with 3 months after release to see what it's looking like for each chapter. And in the case of Sadako Rising, those 3 months actually saw a loss of 4,159 players on Steam. So not nearly as bad as what Xenomorph saw, but there was a loss. But when you compare it to the big kind of capital L licenses, you may notice something, right? So Project W, which was the second Resident Evil chapter.
I think one of the things is like, because I've been down this route before too, of just like super overanalyzing the Steam charts. I think one of the things that doesn't like reflect is like we only use the metric of like player count. That is the only number we care about. We don't care about like profits or like returning players or like new players. Like the only metric, and it's because it's the only metric we can see. Like the only metric we care about is current player count. And there's a lot more that goes into that. So it's like a more complicated pie, which is why we were talking about at the beginning. It's like more of an impression thing than anything.
Over 3 months, it added 1,113 players. Silent Hill saw an addition of 6,416
on the PTB for it,
players. Stranger Things saw an addition of 4,210 players, and then most.
Buy your merch, I love it. That's what I did when I was sick. When I was like,
saw an increase of 10,000.
When I was super sick, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna work on something.
Obviously, those numbers are not exactly something you would turn your nose up at, especially the original Resident Evil chapter. And it struck me as odd. It struck me as odd that we are looking at this and we're seeing the Xenomorph, we're seeing Ellen Ripley, we're seeing Alien lose almost the same amount of players that the game gained through the Resident Evil chapter. That is surprising to me. I'm not going to, I think you'll find that overall I'm not quite panicked by this, but I will say, if nothing else, I find that surprising.
Yeah, Stranger Things debuted like arguably in like DBD's like heyday, you know. Whereas like this debuted like very late in the life cycle. So that is a good point, Kaiser.
Back around to this at the end. I kind of want to return to the numbers in just a little bit. Right now, I want to go through some other aspects of, you know,
yeah, the original chapter was like 100K something.
Try to talk about it in that regard, but put a pin in this. We are going to return to the player numbers and what my general thoughts are on that. So obviously, one of the major parts of any given chapter is going to be how were the characters themselves received. This matters a ton for original chapters.
That's also
I think
true,
it matters
Kaiser.
even more for licensed chapters because sometimes, so take for example the Saw series. They got the Saw license, but with it, instead of adding say Jigsaw and I don't know, Dr. Gordon or Detective Carey, they added David Tapp, who's not exactly a popular character, and they chose Amanda instead of Jigsaw or even Hoffman. The choices were kind of strange there, but luckily we didn't really see anything like that with this one, where when you're making an Alien chapter, the Xenomorph is the only option. It's the obvious option, and that's what they went with. Now, I know there have been different versions of the Xenomorph over the course of the films, but they went with the classic, and that was the best decision. As far as the survivor, they could have gone with Amanda Ripley from Alien Isolation, but it's even better that they got Ellen Ripley, who is obviously
that'd be so cool, legendary for
famous. You know, good choice there. Not having
Sucker bites up the killer
definitely hurt, but you know, I mean, look, there could be a positive spin for that. I mean, hopefully it makes it easier to get skins in the future. And
true.
Speaking of skins, Xeno has been eating good.
Oh yeah, it's
3
great.
months out, Xenomorph has had some awesome skins. Xeno Queen is a massive success. Clone is just gnarly, just grisly, hard to look at. Fantastic killer skin. Grid looks really
Grid's
cool.
My favorite.
Definitely gives hope that Predator will join the game one day. And then the Blighted Xeno is just stunning, just absolutely perfect. As for Ripley, her base outfit is good, and I don't hate her sequel skin. But I'm not crazy about the Ripley 8 clone skin. I don't know. It looks like something somebody would wear in Mass Effect or something like that.
Hey, listen, there's a lot of things that aren't great about Alien Resurrection, but Ripley's design in that film is amazing. We do not talk crap about that. There's a lot of things we can get together as a powwow, and we can get together. We can congregate, have a town hall meeting. We can have a congregation. We can have a we can have a get together, and we can talk about many things about Alien Resurrection being terrible. Ripley's design in that is not one of them. Not one of them.
Like that. Like, it's not necessarily my favorite skin.
It's terrible.
Like I said,
it just puts a black screen
good, but
during the ad
treatment, and you hate to see it. So
yeah, I'm getting a new ad block.
Overall, character reception was pretty good though. They got it right with their choices. I think nobody's gonna complain about that outside of maybe the likeness issue. As far as
she
the
with my
map is
aunt.
concerned,
That's funny.
I mean, look, they killed it again. They knocked it out of the park. The Nostromo wreckage was a very clever choice, and it was clever for many reasons. Everybody wanted the Nostromo, but I think a lot of people have kind of grown to be wary of indoor maps. So by having the ship's crash site serve as the map, they were able to cram the map full of alien references, which is awesome, but they were still able to make it kind of a proper DBD map, which is also awesome. It's a double win there. The aesthetic, great. Gameplay, all right. Overall, yeah. I think generally speaking, people are going to
YouTube is really cracking down on the ad blocks.
Comes out, and
like literally, I keep having to switch because they start like the ones I use just whatever one I use just gets like taken down or not taken down but stops working.
And I think this one will do that.
Like,
obviously, a big part of any chapter is going to be.
It's been fine. You sent me yours.
Let's run through them. Okay, 6 perks, and I think this is kind of a rarity. This chapter was a bit of a rarity. It was rare in that there's not a single awful perk in here. None of these perks are without their use, and that's pretty cool to see.
I wouldn't say. I mean, I guess some are.
The Xenomorph.
Hey, Candle.
Say Rapid Brutality. It's a promising perk. It pairs well with Save the Best for Last, and I think it may find.
Yeah, I guess the perks aren't bad.
For now, let's just consider.
There's just something that's like
perk that has the potential to be much better once made for this is nerfed. If that nerf goes through, I think Rapid Brutality gets a lot stronger because right now, you know, you get that 5% boost, and that's cool. But if they're already going 3% faster, you really got like a 2% boost, and all of a sudden that's a lot less meaningful. So where Made for this goes, I think will impact Rapid Brutality, but for the time being, it's a pretty cool perk, and I think there's a lot of potential for it. Alien Instinct is a well-designed perk
just opera ad blocker
to pursue wounded prey around the map, which is a pretty cool concept. It's
like the one that comes with it?
Because
the one that came with it
does come with a minor downside.
YouTube was catching that.
You know, you look at this one, is it ideal? Is it great? Is it fantastic? I wouldn't say any of those things about it, but I would say I could see myself using it. It's not one that I look at as like, yeah, like that'll happen. It's an all right perk. It's all right. In fact, it's better than all right. I'd say it's even good, probably. Decent. Though I suppose decent and alright are synonyms, so what do I know? Of course, the big one is Ultimate Weapon, and it's the most polarizing perk in this chapter, and I actually think it's the main reason why Calm Spirit is kind of bordering.
I think it could lose the blindness, if you guys wonder how I feel about this. It could use the blindness. I think the perk's fine, for the most part. I think it's just like, it's a lot of info, but it's kind of depends how you use it, so. I think it's you mostly see hatred for it based on characters that already bottleneck design, like Nurse and stuff like that, like people who can teleport straight to the screams. And there's also a perk to get around it if you really don't want it. So, yeah, see, I did that, Kaiser, but YouTube was still catching it.
Notes ever. So it's a great perk. Nobody's denying that. Nobody's denying there's a very strong perk, but I think it could use a slight nerf. All I would change about it is make the cooldown time a little harsher, because right now the way it works is the killer can open a locker, they can find where most everybody is. I mean, they're going to get like 2 or 3 with it just about every time. And then they can go down somebody and just do it again. And that to me, first off, it makes Doctor way less special. kind of stealing Doctor's thing. But then, I don't know. I think it's fine. Use a minor nerf. And outside of that, I think it'd be a pretty awesome perk. Moving over to the Survivor side, Ellen Ripley came with Chemical Trap, which is a very fun perk.
This is what I was saying. Like, you said none were bad. I feel like Chemical Trap's kind of bad. Unless you slap it on like a god palette that blocks like a whole hallway that you have to kick, like Chemical Trap is kind of just terrible. Like, you could run like Lucky Star with like certain locker perks. Light-footed's great for like saves and stuff like that. The Chemical Trap actually is kind of just Chemical Trap's kind of just bad. It's not I don't think it's a good perk at all.
I like that it rewards both doing the objective and then looping. So if you do the objective, you get a benefit when you loop. And that's really cool. Very awesome to see. It doesn't, at least in my experience, see a ton of use, but I do think it's kind of like Rapid Brutality. It's going to become more popular as time goes on. It's just not quite there yet.
No, I don't think so.
It's going to be a lot better.
I think Chemical Trap's pretty bad.
There's like,
yeah, it is definitely way too map dependent, right? It's way too map dependent. And like, even like, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of what maps it would even be that great on. Like maybe I don't know. It's just like, it's really dependent on the palette you put it on. And there's not a whole lot of palettes in the game that like you have to kick. Like there's Shack palette. Yeah. Put on Shack. Yes. There's certain palettes on certain maps like Larry's. There's that palette that blocks the whole hallway. Midwich palette that blocks the whole hallway. Yeah. But like, those are so rare that you bring a whole perk slot just to slow somebody down for kicking them. Like, it's just not worth it.
Has to face this on the meat plant. You may as well just kind of assume this one's not going to go so well. But yeah, Chemical Trap, what a fun perk. And I think when the first thing I think about with the perk is how fun it is, that's a well-designed perk. After that, we had Light-Footed.
It is fun. It's just not great.
Perk that does fit really well into stealth builds. I think that, okay, so running silently is way stronger than some people would think. And I think a 20-second cooldown.
Yeah, Light-Footed's great. I like it.
It's not that bad of a penalty. You're not going to look at a 20-second cooldown and say, well, I'm not going to bring that perk. When you consider that so many perks have 60-second cooldowns and 130-second cooldowns and all that. Overall, or 120 probably. But yeah, no, 20 seconds, that's nothing. It's a solid perk. It's, again, is it S tier? No, not even close, but it's all right. It's above the middle of the pack, I think. And then we have Lucky Star, which is just the ultimate companion piece to Quick and Quiet. Very cool perk.
I don't see a lot of people doing that, though. It is a companion perk, but I don't see a lot of people running it together. Like, they just don't use it enough.
Queue players, I think it's one that if you're running solo queue and you kind of feel like maybe, I don't know, maybe you don't have enough.
Yeah, also, like, them putting the trap on it, like... Yeah, like, it's very obvious, too. So, like, if you see it as killer... You just gotta go, okay, well, I'm not gonna kick that palette unless you have to. So I do agree, Sully. I think that would be a good quality of life buff to try and like make it a little bit harder to spot. Yeah, that would help.
Information on the average game. I would say run this perk and just see if you get some use out of it, because I think you will. Also, I guess Head On probably pairs well with it. Whatever the Nancy one is, they just changed its name again. So, you know, there are a couple of locker perks that, hey, you could just go for a full locker build with this one, which usually is something you think of killers doing, but it's kind of cool to think of survivors doing it. So very cool. Overall, these are stellar perks. And I can't believe I'm saying this because I try to be really critical here, but I'd give this chapter an A for its perk designs. I think that, you know,
I mean, for the most part, it's good.
If you're going on the system of like, I don't know, S to F tier, none of these are worse than like a B tier perk, and that's pretty cool.
Once again,
there's only one
we talked about
really
Chemical Trap.
Kind of problematic design, and even then, it's such a simple fix for Ultimate Weapon that yeah, this is a really good batch of perks. So anybody that thinks this chapter failed certainly is not going to be looking at the perks to blame it. But that does bring me back to what I said I wanted to circle around to, which was this concept of the Steam charts, and they look at it and they say, oh, it's lost 10,000 players. Ooh, yeah, okay, I get that. I mean, look, I understand that, but respectfully, as somebody who's
that is a name. Bozo, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it.
I have to put it out there.
Hopefully you're having a good night tonight, friend.
To stop caring about the Steam chart so much.
Yep,
and it's not because I'm saying
I got away from it.
Ignore objective reality, just focus on the vibe. But there is something to that, right? I think that when you have a live service game, there's going to be ebbs and flows. And well, look, I have no doubt, yes, Behavior thought this one would be one of the spikes, and it wasn't necessarily. I think that ultimately you just have to look at that as more a case where people were just kind of frustrated with the state of the game in general, and it's not the Alien chapter not being good, because overall you're looking at awesome characters, awesome perks, I think a generally awesome map, and then really the only standout negative I would say is the alien's power itself, which I haven't mentioned to this point.
The
overall,
negative?
There are things to like about the
Why?
power. I think the little underworld it can crawl through is very cool.
Negative?
I think that there's something to be said for the fact that it was essentially a slightly changed version of the Demogorgon at a time where people couldn't play the Demogorgon. So, you know, there are things to like, but obviously
you were barking up a wrong tree here, friend.
Like, as things currently stand, there's just not a ton of counterplay for a really good Xeno player.
All I will say, I'll say it very calmly. Learning turret placement, very important to countering the Xenomorph. If you want to knock the Xenomorph out of the power, 2 turrets next to each other does that pretty well. But the main use of the turrets is to space them out. That way you use them as chase extenders, because the Xenomorph has to break them. So I want to align them more with somebody like Pinhead, where like having good like, you know, if you have like a team that doesn't know to put down turrets and not where to place them, yeah, it can be kind of frustrating. But to say they have 0 counterplay, like, I don't know about that. The turrets are a huge part of it. It's probably the biggest part of it. That's what matters the most. There's also the baiting mind games that you do against nemesis. That's a lot of what you do as well. And obviously, if you're going to pre-drop, do it early outside of the 4.8 meters so you don't get sniped. So, yeah, it's a little bit not as bleak as you think, but this is the most common take I hear. This comes out of like every person. Like, this is like every survivor main I hear is like, oh my god, this is the worst character to release. There's 0 counterplay.
Which couldn't be me. I can't hit the tail attack to save my life, but hey, you know, that's not really a reason to say, oh,
it's not easy.
Overpowered. I can't do it. It's like, oh, well, maybe I'm just bad, and I am.
It's overpowered?
I don't know. I look at it and I think that the Xeno's power is definitely, to me, a downside, but I don't think that having a questionable power is enough to make it lose 10,000 players. Plenty of people don't like Nemesis's power, which is a hard word to say, and Nemi saw over 10,500 people join the game in his first 3 months, so you can't really say that the power is going to determine it all. I mean, and there are a lot of examples of that. Plenty of people don't like Pyramid Head's power.
That's what makes Cloud you true.
So you can't just blame the power. I think that ultimately,
I don't like that it doesn't have counterplay. I'm the character that literally slows you down and makes you do things that you don't want to do and go down for free.
But ultimately, the trends don't mean everything, and I guarantee you the game will bounce back in a pretty strong way. So I mentioned earlier that Sadako Rising lost 4,100 something players before, you know, in the first 3 months that it was out, but I think what gets lost in that is that the next month, which was the anniversary month, and it was the Dredge and Hattie and somehow the Garn of Joy and all that, that month saw 17,000 people hop back in the game. So I think that you have to take this as a thing of ebbs and flows. And look, if you have a straight year where every month is in the red, then you can say, okay, there's a problem here.
Yeah.
But 3 months in the red, 4 months in the red, it's really not a big deal. And ultimately, I think that this talk of the Alien chapter failing is understandable, but I also think it's kind of silly. So that's just my 2 cents on that. I know that some people are gonna probably, you know, if you don't, if you're smarter than me and you choose not to spend a lot of time on Twitter, you're probably aware of people calling this one a failure. But I've seen a lot of people do it, and that's very anecdotal, you know. And no, I'm not going to share my homework, but but it is something I've seen. So I wanted to address it and say like, hey, we're in a good place. Obviously, a lot of hype around this Chucky chapter. Stranger Things is back.
It's just that like DBD players are just negative Nancy's, and you just gotta take things that they say with a grain of salt. Like the general population that plays this game or just like chills and watches it on Twitch or plays, you know, casually, they don't care about this sort of stuff. They don't care if the Alien chapter failed or not. Like it could have been the biggest bomb ever and it wouldn't matter. Versus like, you know, it being the big success ever. It doesn't affect most of the population that plays this game. It's just kind of like the little like Angie echo chamber that is the hyper obsessed DBD community, you know? That's I wouldn't pay attention to them.
Like,
yeah, it is kind of confusing.
Ultimately, we're going to look back and we're going to be super hyped that we have the Xenomorph, that we have Ellen Ripley, that we have the Nostromo as a map.
Yeah, true, Jimmy.
That we got the perks we did. And yeah, it's going to be weird. I think there's going to be one that probably will confuse behavior for a while. How this one lost 10,000 players, because that is strange. But ultimately, I'm also pretty confident in saying from the amount of Xeno Queens I've seen running around that this chapter made a lot of money for
it did.
So financially, we'll never know for sure unless they put out their financial records, which they won't. But we'll never know what they made off of this one. But I would actually go out on a limb and say, yeah, probably a lot of money. Probably a pretty penny. Probably mucho dinero. So I don't really worry about it being a failure. And I think that we as a community owe it to them to say, hey, it was a cool chapter. It was a fun chapter.
Sometimes no, don't, Sylvie.
What you want it to be. But
she already has so many of those cringe skins. Don't do it.
Have you even thought about this? Is this something that has occupied your mind, or do I just have too much time on my hands? And now that you are thinking about it, do you think the
like I've talked about before, when it comes to conversations like these, it's always just kind of like a theory crafting thing for people. That it's just like if people are upset with the game for one reason or another, whether it be the meta or like a specific perk or a map design, people will just kind of like say the game's doing well or the game's failing, just kind of to fit whatever like kind of like doomsaying they want to, whatever narrative they want to push, you know? If like they hate the meta, there's too many meta perks controlling the game and the game's stale and boring, then you're like, yeah, game's dying. Look, Steam chart's saying that, you know, all the chapters are failing. But then like if they're happy, they don't even check the Steam charts anymore. They don't give a crap, right? Because all they care about is just pushing a narrative. So usually when stuff like that crops up, there's not really a lot of like weight to it. It's just like somebody wants to push a narrative because they're mad at the game or want something changed. So they're like, oh, well, guess what? Things are dying. And it's like, well, this thing failed. And then you look and you're like, okay, well, is it really? And it's usually not. So that's kind of what I suspected when it came to people being like, oh, well, the game is failing or the Alien chapter failed. Like, it's just, you know, it's people being upset about ABC and kind of just pushing a narrative. So, yeah.